So, topic one. Juneteenth is a day that celebrates the announcement of the end of slavery in Texas. It will very likely become our newest federal holiday. It is supposed to inspire pride in America, but should it? How should American descendants of slavery, and Black Americans in general, view this date? Should this instead be a celebration that reminds us of our collective roots in Africa? Or is this a symbol of progress in the States? So this was given to us by our good friend GSU Gambit. Why don't we start with him and move on? Go ahead, GSU.
Yeah, so man, I didn't know about Juneteenth until maybe 2014. So this was like not not even that long ago when I learned about Juneteenth. And since then I've tried to do something to represent it. I represented a lot more the last like 4 years, I think. So I grill and invite a bunch of people to the house. It's a big sense of pride that hey, this is a date that our country in Texas, the last slaves were freed. So I think it's a tremendous holiday. I think that all Americans, white, black, indigenous, green, purple, whatever, I think everybody should be celebrating it. Should this be? Yeah. I think, and I also, I do hate that it is somewhat attached to Pan-Africanism. I specifically hate that. I think there's a meme in our culture of tying things that are black to Pan-Africanism rather than the American holiday that this is. This is a celebration of a group of Americans being enfranchised in some ways that were still rampant systemic oppression. But yes, I think that this should be integrally celebrated as a American holiday more specifically than a Pan-African holiday. But yeah, I want to see how others feel.
Okay. There's a few places we can take this subject, and I'm actually really interested in knowing all of your opinions. All right, so let's go with Chris Cosmo's introduction.
Okay, yeah, my thought of it is a little different than GSU's. I kind of think that Juneteenth should serve as a day of remembrance, reflection, and kind of mourning for like a lot of forgotten histories and erased histories of African Americans. Right? I kind of feel kind of gross using the day as celebration because I don't like the idea of celebrating not being under the threat of chattel slavery anymore. Right? That's just it kind of weirds me out. And to GSU Gambit's point, like I didn't know about Juneteenth until like I was watching the show Blackish, right? I watched the episode where they did the Juneteenth episode, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" And like it shocked me because I'm like, "How the hell do I not know this?" And like for me, I consider myself I thought to be well read, like at least on African American history, and there's still things like even as close to an adult that I didn't know, right? That you're just still finding out. And I think this holiday should serve as like a remembrance of like some of those things that we don't even know yet. Still, there still might be some things about our history that might come to light later on that like will blow our minds, right? I think that's what we should use it as. I think that's what the country should use it as, is they're remembering those people, thinking of all the histories that are either forgotten or just hidden away from us. And it's for me, it's more of a sad day than a happy day because like it just brings up those things, like it brings up those memories. So even though I understand people want to use it as a celebration, there's just something about it that just feels kind of like in the pit of my stomach, it makes me kind of sick. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Madeline.
Hey, so I was doing some research on this, and I guess it's actually official, isn't it? They
Yeah,
just
it's
did this.
official.
I didn't realize this was gonna happen. Well, that's cool. So I guess I have like this. This is probably gonna be really boring, but I think I agree with both GSU and Chris. Like, I think you can have both, right? Like Memorial Day weekend, for example, is a day where you remember your losses for those who served, but then you also go out and grill and whatever else. And I think it's entirely possible to have fun on a day and also remember what was lost on the same day. Like, I think sorrow and grief can stand side by side with like just hanging out with the family and doing something fun. So like I don't see any reason why this couldn't work in that way. And as far as should it, I think it'll just be sort of like what people decide to do with the fact that this day is a federal holiday. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, because like I know that a lot of important, like MLK Day, for example, is supposedly a federal holiday, but like I don't think people treat it as such, right? Like there's a lot of, I could see it not going in the Memorial Day direction and going in that direction as well. So I think it's a matter of like how many folks are in like, not to be controversial, I'm going to use this word, solidarity with Black culture, and are willing to set aside a day and actually do something that is associated with Juneteenth rather than whatever event they schedule for that weekend because they have a day off.
Shark?
What, like, I do agree, like Juneteenth is like one of those things. I think I learned about it literally last year. But I feel like I'm a little bit younger than a lot of these other panelists. So
He calling you out, Chris.
I'm ahead of the game there.
Oh man,
Yeah,
he calling you out.
I feel like a boomer now.
No, no.
I'm ahead of the game there.
Go ahead, Shark.
When it comes to that, I can see it being used as like both like a day of remembrance and also celebration. I think we should celebrate these people not suffering under the threat of like chattel slavery anymore. I think that's a categorically good thing. That being said, we should remember like all of the people who were harmed by this, who died and had lives taken away from them because of it. You can do both of those things, I think, at the same time. I like the idea of leaving it up to whatever the person believes is the best way to celebrate it. You know, I mean, what would those like freed slaves do with their time? What, party, cry, do nothing? Whatever you do, I think that's a perfectly fine thing. Honestly, that's a perfectly fine thing. How you use that, and in a way, I kind of like the idea of it not being this like really big sort of Memorial Day, like Christmas, Easter sort of holiday, because usually when that happens, what does that really mean? Well, it just gets monetized. It's just like a marketing day. And I'm not really sure if too many Black people would be super happy with end of Black people being property day to let's go out and buy some property day necessarily, which, you know, that you do, once again, you can do whatever you want with the day. Well, when it comes to like the Pan-African thing, I think it's important to always remember like African diaspora and all of that. But personally, like how I consider myself, how I think of myself, like I'm a gun-toting, God-fearing American. Like at the end of the day, I mean, Africans, they're what they are, and they're like beautiful people. I'm not really African. I'm African American. It's a very important and very different subsect of what of Black people, and I think that I'd like to celebrate it as such.
Okay. Oh boy, we have lots of places to take this. Azzy, up to your opinion.
For sure.
I learned about Juneteenth, I think for the first time 2015, and I started to learn more about it through a podcast I started listening to called Divergent Thought. Through there was three African American men who are a part of corporate America, and they're also in sports medicine, and they were athletes. And they were they were engaging with it as well. So I was learning about it more and more over time. And I just have to say, shout out to all those Black Americans who knew about Juneteenth and just continue to uphold that tradition before we even became, as popular as it is now. And I'm thankful it became popular, because that just shows the sign of the times. Hopefully, that we're not just some underground people that we just kind of sort of learn of, slowly learn about, our history here and our importance here. I remember they were having a conversation about Black privilege before, about how we are only so privileged to do so many things when there's a lot more to the story. Juneteenth is very important for us. It's the end of slavery in America, and even though it came at least 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. People always like to put out how helpful Abraham Lincoln was, but people don't really know the history. So I just want to say, I'm not gonna badmouth. So it's like Pan-Africanism. Shout out to those Pan-Africanists who made it their duty to make sure the traditions of celebrating things like these and keeping the history and traditions alive so that it could become a national holiday today. Even though it becoming a national holiday in the way it did, we have some qualms about it. Hopefully we'll get to talk about it later. But yeah, I love this. I love this holiday, and it shows, and especially for those who are grandchildren of slaves who are still alive today. That history is still touching us, and it touches many people and their families. So it's very important. It's very important.
Okay. Um, I'm with Chris here. I think I found out about Juneteenth during that Blackish episode as well. I saw, and not even when it aired. I saw it afterwards when it was on Hulu. So yeah, I probably learned it later than you did. Yeah, it was also a surprise to me. I had no idea what they were talking about, so I had to look into it myself. And then I think I forgot about it until like last year. Just so yeah, it's I think I get, yeah, my all my thoughts kind of mirror Chris's here, and that you think you know you're generally in the know, and then you don't know, and then something like this gets past you. We're not taught about it in schools, right? Like, this is not a thing that showed up even in the primarily black school, like the ones I went to. My first and second schools were primarily black, and they never discussed it. I'm curious how much how many of my teachers knew. And it reminds me of like the Tulsa massacre, right? It's how many of us have only just recently found out about that, right? And did it through random media rather than actually being taught that Black history. I think it just goes to show that Black history is oftentimes treated as not American history, right? As is not integral to every fucking thing that's ever happened in this country, as if it's just like a side topic, right? Like you guys all remember those history textbooks, right? They'll have like a side panel, and it's like, well, here's black people did this, this, and this. All right, back to white folks, right? Your black hour moment, right? And then back to white people.
Yeah.
That's kind of how our history is treated. So it's not a surprise that so many of us don't know these things, right? Even if you feel that you're well aware. Anyway, fine. So let's you can jump into it.
Oh
Wait,
yeah,
one thing.
Okay.
One thing. We need to address this because it's super important. So as he did something that he should have done, right? So we have Juneteenth coming up, and black people are always lazy, and we get our haircut on a Friday. He's gonna come in here fresh, while I'm like bombed out. I'm pissed at this, but yo, just to get that out of the way. But no, go ahead, Chris. I just wanted to meet
No,
him as he
actually
doing it a
wanted
day early.
yeah, I wanted to address the Pan-Africanism that you had brought up because I didn't do it in my opening. And I understand, like, I actually agree with you about this idea, like, of like putting Pan-Africanism into it so much is like we kind of shouldn't do that. I mean, I understand that why people want to, but honestly, when it comes to my history in this country, it's just flat out American. And like, as far as back as I can trace it, it's just like it's just American, and I can't do any tracing back of like African like roots, right? Other than like a DNA test to like trace back that far. But like that'll be like some like random white person, celebrating their Viking roots. Like, you know what I mean? They have no connection to that culture whatsoever or to that land. Like it makes no sense. And like as far as I know, because of what the country of America done to like my ancestors' history, this is all I know. I'm more American than the people who claim to be the most American in this country, right? Like a bunch, like there's tons of white people who like second, third generation immigrants who who swear like on the Bible that like they're more American than you, and like your history starts and ends in America. You know what I mean? So like
I don't know if I agree with that though. Like, I think even if you're, I mean, like if you're assimilated, and I mean, I can acknowledge being assimilated, right? Like as a mixed black man, I'm like super assimilated. I don't know where I belong or who, like
You
what you're
belong with us,
with my ancestry, right? But like, I think there's something to be said for looking into your heritage and appreciating what your ancestors could have celebrated, even if it's through like DNA tests. Like I just got to see my grandmother's DNA test, and I figured out which parts of Africa some of my family members came from, and that was really cool for me. I was just, I always wondered. I always wanted to figure out, like, uh, if I'm looking into like African mythology, which mythological figures should I be like looking into, or do I need to look at the whole continent? You know what I mean?
I mean, think about it this way.
Yeah.
My ancestry traces back to sub-Saharan Africa, and
Right.
like for as much as we know, that's where the human like race started at. I have no idea. Like,
Hold on. It doesn't quite work that way though. Like
no,
DNA. Yeah. Okay. Go
what
ahead.
I'm saying is like, what I'm saying is that far removed from me. That's what I mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't like when I go there and look up something. Like, I have no idea what culture
Yeah.
my ancestors were part of in that, like in this big country or this big continent, right? No matter like what parts of Africa I'm traced to, I have no idea what they participated
All right,
in.
hold on. So, but work
Like,
with me here. Work with me here. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. Like for you, you can have that attitude. I'm just saying it's not wrong for anyone to want to like look back into their heritage and say, hey, I come from probably this region of Africa, and these are the things that my potential ancestors celebrated. Like, I find that type of thing incredibly fascinating. And I mean, you study history clearly. Wouldn't you want to know about like what happened in sub-Saharan Africa? In like 400 years between like say 1200 and 1600, like what the environment was like before your ancestors were brought over here, right? Like, there's like something to that.
sure,
Something special about that, right?
I don't
I
really care
guess,
for it. I don't.
yeah, like it's again like it doesn't like it nothing translated from then until now for me and like my family, right? The only we like everything we
The
like,
culture is gone. I understand the culture
yeah,
is gone, but like, and I mean, I can relate to that because like again, fully assimilated, right? However, there's something like, don't you feel like a little bit of like something special when you think about your heritage at all? Like, not even a little
Not
bit.
at all. Not
Here.
not
All right.
from
Not too
anything
much,
that
no.
originates outside of America. I don't. I really don't.
So
I
it
have no
might be a
connection to it.
situation where I'm like so removed from like maybe even like my African American roots that like everything attached to that part of my life and maybe the other part of my life, like my Middle Eastern heritage, is just kind of interesting to me. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
Like maybe you're just more of a historian than us, right? Like maybe there's
okay,
some
fine.
part of it that's like, and I don't mean that in like a bad way. I'm just saying like,
I understand. Like, I do like history a lot, and I'm like super into mythology, so maybe it's just like a me thing, I guess. But it's
exactly,
not
yeah.
that like folks would want to know like what gods and goddesses or whatever their ancestors like worshipped, right? Like, but I
Yeah,
guess
the way I look at it, and this is just bad maybe, but like the only thing I care about is America because that's the country that I live in. That's the country that my kids are going to live in. So I just care about striving for more and more equality here. And the things that came before that I'm not connected to, I don't participate in the traditions. I just have zero.
Feels like cultural appropriation. Like it feels like especially when you see people walking around with just dashikis and stuff, like they're like
That's a
trying to learn
good
the language.
question.
Like
Do we
it
culturally appropriate Africans? Dude,
Oh my
that's
goodness.
no,
like
Oh
you
my
can't.
god.
You can't.
Oh
No,
my
that's
Oh
goodness.
man.
I mean,
no.
This is
Yeah.
That's
like the
no.
art can Japanese
No.
people be weeaboos discourse, but
no, they
that's
can
like
though. They can be
yeah,
otakus, right? All right, never mind. Whatever. The point is,
black
no,
otaku.
you can't culturally appropriate your ancestors' culture. Like you kind of are, but like not in the negative connotation way, right? Like
I
you're
mean,
trying to take back what you had and what was stolen from you by slavers.
Oh,
How do you know you're
okay.
thinking the right thing though?
Well,
Like,
yeah,
right?
and
I mean,
also
it's
I
not
want
right
to
or
push back
wrong.
a little bit. I want to push back a little bit on the idea of like that culture is gone. Not every single black culture from like Western or like yeah, from like Western Africa are were like completely obliterated. Lots of those cultures still exist, and lots of those cultures like evolved. I mean, you don't have to get involved in like the culture 450 years ago. You can get. I mean, I don't know what does like Western African cultures look like today, and when we get on that, I mean, their cultures are like their cultures, and I mean, you could always look into it, but I'm not gonna walk around in like any like traditional African garb that like my great ancestors had from like Western Africa. I just wouldn't do that. I would be like, oh, that's I'd look it up and be like, damn, that's cool. And then I'd move on with my life. And that's kind of like it, right? I think their culture's as beautiful as our culture because like cultures they mean a lot to to the people that are there. And I think we may like fetishize a little bit of like feather headdress wearing like rain dancing Africans a little bit too much like the like that sort of idea like you like how people do with like Native Americans. Like Native Americans have culture today, and it is like different than when 400, 600, 1,000 years ago. But people always like that like pilgrim sort of like idea. But we could do that the same with those African cultures. I think they can be like respected, and they could, you know, it's their thing. But I think, you know, our culture is our culture and their culture is their culture, and we can look at it and we can think that's great, and you could even like take some things of it. But I mean, unless you're planning on really moving there or anything, and that
So
culture is still the same.
this
I don't
is
know.
I'm curious how explosive this is about to get. I'm not on that all cultures are beautiful tip. Like not me. Sorry. Some cultures, or at least some aspects of some cultures. Yeah, I couldn't say all of a culture because that's
yeah.
huge and diffuse. So I wouldn't say that. But some aspects of some cultures
The
suck.
culture that
Of American culture, or of let's not get in that conversation again like last night. But the like of any culture around the world, there's like ugly parts to it, right? And some weird ass shit that people do, right? Again, weird shit that Americans do as well. So I'm never on like, oh wow, you know, like if so. So one thing is I haven't got any genetic test like anyone, like I haven't done that. And those tests, right, what they can do, they'll show you markers, right, markers in your DNA that are more likely to come from some populations in some areas, right. So it doesn't actually tell you exactly where you're from, just like you're more likely to have an ancestor here than there. So okay, right. And then for African Americans, it's like even if you could start tracing back, your family would be diffuse, right? It would be spread out because they broke us up, right? And then rearranged us, and they bred us, right? And not just African Americans, just but like Africans in general. Everyone part of the diaspora, like your lineage is all over Western Africa, maybe some East African, right? It's all over the place. So it's hard to. So even if you did what Shark was talking about, like, well, look up your past. Well, which one? Like, which area, which culture am I having reverence to, right? That's why
you'd have to have like an interest in it, though. Like
yeah.
I guess you'd have to
So
have like
hold
an
on,
actual
let me finish my
interest.
point. So let me finish my point. So GSU, I think I can understand what he's saying. It's saying that I like you don't have much pride in that because like well, pride in exactly what,
Yeah.
right? It's not like an insult to our African brothers and sisters. It's like pride in what? I don't know, right? Like I'd have to have carry on a whole list of things to be prideful of. A bunch of tribes, a bunch of traditions, gods, all of that. So you couldn't even just pick one. So I mean, it's just part. So for many people, and we've had this discussion before, like a while ago, right? So for many people, their pride starts in America, right? Like they'll talk about, for people who are probably like African Americans, they'll talk about like, well, my family traces back to South Carolina, right? And that's only, and even then, that's only one part of your family because other parts came from Florida and whatever, right? That's where you landed, and then again, your parents were traded around, your ancestors were traded around. So, but they'll say that my family, as far as I can trace back comes from like South Carolina. So I have pride in being from South Carolina. And for me, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another thing. Like, when it comes to Pan-Africanists, like, it's just like it's sometimes it seems like they do the most to ignore a lot of the culture that we built here in America. Like, right, instead of trying to dig up the culture that we built here, that a lot of it's still hidden from us, they go all the way back and search for some fantasy of what could have been in Africa, right? And it just like makes you sad because there's so much here, right? Like, from black cowboys to like just musicians and artists, like from this country that we like completely the American culture is built on a foundation of like black art, right? In black art, black like work and like labor, and it's a part of this country, right? It's infused with it. You can't separate it. So like there's so much more we need to mine from it and learn about it that we just haven't like done the work for it, and trying to reach back so far into a past that like completely was just wiped away from us. Like, yeah, those cultures are still there, but
Like,
our connections to them are like completely gone. Right? Like Prime
oh,
said, people got on shore, they started like they take individuals from their families, mix them up, like breed them out, like, and you just it's just a whole mix and a whole mess of things that happen, and you just completely there's no paperwork done, there's no nothing, like
right.
there's
So,
nothing.
so like the culture is lost. I agree that like the slavers did a like a very efficient job of removing our heritage from us, right? Like I agree with that. What I'm saying is that I don't see why it's important to like vilify Pan-Africanism or just folks who want to celebrate African American culture. Like I don't see a reason why you can't
Well,
do both.
It's not
well,
villainizing them, right?
my point was more of this, like, how can I say this the most succinctly? I don't even care about being succinct, maybe. Like when I look at celebrations of Black people and it's constantly made African, it's more of the Black people aren't American. Like when you hear people say American, they aren't usually talking about Black people, and it really infuriates me because I'm like, yo, I'm just as American as the nigga running around with the Confederate flag. But like I think that Black and American should be as integral as white and American is. And when how all of this started was I was looking for a Juneteenth T-shirt, and I went online. If you go to Amazon, you write Juneteenth T-shirt. All of them almost are have like Pan African colors or African colors or whatever. I don't even know what the difference is really. And I was like, yo, why are there no American colored Juneteenth shirts? So I posted
What
on
does that
Facebook,
mean? What is American color?
like
Why
red,
does it
white, and blue,
matter? Why does it matter?
because I feel like this is an American holiday to celebrate Americans
But for the
being
longest time, it
enfranchised.
wasn't. For the longest
No,
time, it
no,
wasn't. It
Juneteenth.
was some
No. For the entirety of its history, Juneteenth has been an American holiday.
no that
Period.
no no because American holidays were national holidays. This Jack, like I said before, Juneteenth was upheld traditionally within Black only communities, and
Black
normally it
Americans.
wasn't just Pan African. Pan African is the way we think of Pan African is we think of the militant, they're doing too
No,
much. Black. They celebrate Juneteenth in Southern churches. They celebrate Juneteenth in Southern communities, in predominantly Black communities. It was something that was upheld traditionally by, specific, like I said, specific individuals. It just wasn't as prolific. This was not an American holiday.
wait,
It
wait,
when you
wait,
when
wait.
you say I don't know what you
Sorry,
mean by American
what's the
holiday is
criteria for
like
something to be an American holiday?
it's like an American holiday is like
You mean it's
Because
only
no,
recognized by the
because
state?
Memorial
that
Day or like
that's
Christmas
strange because you consider Martin Luther King Day to be an American holiday, but not necessarily everyone goes ahead and celebrates it except for Pan-African people.
Kwanzaa is something that was, I don't even would you consider Kwanzaa an American holiday?
Wait. So let me
but
change my words
It's not
because
equivalent.
hold on, wait. I don't want to get
This is a weird
I don't want to get caught on this semantic thing. It's
I
a
don't-
celebration of American history. Do you disagree with that?
It's a national holiday. Like it was signed into law
It was
today.
recently
No,
made a
even
national holiday.
even
One
before
second. I'll be right back.
even before it became a national holiday, it's a celebration of an event of American history. Period.
Right. And
There's-
like if something becomes a national holiday, usually it's because it's being celebrated anyway, right? Like there's like a tradition that becomes a national holiday. So like I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're.
especially like,
Anyway.
yeah, but then also
so
I was gonna
going
say
back-
if people are here for like 400 years, they're citizens, like right, like you can't separate that from like the country. So I like sure you can say like, oh, this is like a bunch of Africans who like made this holiday in celebration of their ending their slavery, but they're no longer Africans. By this time, like it was too late. 400 years of slavery, it was already done. Like, so,
But hon, the whole
Well, not
part about
400 years.
America is that you don't have to be here for that long, right? You could just move here. You could become an American, right? Like we
Exactly,
integrate you. So I wouldn't even go that far. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I don't think, like, I agree that slavery did its thing and like took away our heritage, and I agree that, like, honestly, I mean, we probably don't even need to talk about it because Juneteenth is more about African Americans rather than Africans. I agree with that too. But we were just talking about folks who wanted to LARP as Africans, and I was just saying, like, I don't see a problem with that. Like, I think we can move on from here and go on to the next part of this discussion.
I don't know. I feel
No.
like LARPing as an African can be kind of cringy, and also I think it can be pretty disrespectful. Honestly, like I don't know. It feels a lot like the people who say like like Africa's a country. Like Africa's one of the most like densely like cultural places in the entire ethnically and culturally. It's one of the densest places in the entire world. You can't
Oh,
you
Honda, yeah.
yeah, it's really I feel personally if I was like an African and someone and some like African American just started like thinking that they were Ugandan for like no reason. I feel like, you know, you got your own thing. I mean, I don't know, like Black American culture, we have our own culture, and I think it's something really amazing. It was birthed out of like such pain and suffering, and it's boomed into such an incredible thing, both like monetarily and like culturally. It, you know, gives so much to not only America but Black people in general. I don't know. I like the thing that we got here.
Yeah, I mean, like, I agree with that. I'm just saying, like, why are we negging these people? Like, we
I
don't have to
think-
make them feel bad. Like, it's fine.
It's appropriation, bro. We've discovered it.
It's appropriation. It's pretty fucked up.
Killing me. All right. I'm gonna.
Yo, KT, how do you feel? Do you think when you see a whole bunch of Black people from where are you from? Where are you from?
I'm from Ghana.
Yeah, so if you saw a whole bunch of Black ADOS people in America like wearing Ghana gear, would you feel that's some sort of appropriation?
I mean, during the
Isn't that
World
what they
Cup,
already
that was
do?
pretty fly. During the World Cup, getting that support was pretty fly. So I'm not gonna knock it.
Yeah.
But
What
isn't
I
that
mean,
already what a lot of people do is they LARP as Africans even though they've never been to Africa in their entire life? Like
I mean,
that's
look,
also
you know, as
aesthetic
a
of like Black nationalists that they're always like, oh, we need to return to the homeland. I'm like, you don't even know what country you're from. So
Yeah.
We
and-
return the homeland. We're just saying wear an outfit every once in a
No,
while.
it's not even. It's about It's about knowledge. It's about knowledge. It's about reclaiming something that was stolen from you. It's about taking pride. And then I hear somebody saying, "Oh, pride is stupid" in the chat. Then why do we have a whole? We have pride holidays for people who are celebrating. Their freedom to enact their culture, the freedom to enact their sexuality and open. Pride is very important. The whole idea of Black nationalism and Black Pan-Africanism is all that it's to uphold an idea of truths and values that we have forgotten. It's not that because we are now American that we just all of a sudden this stuff is no longer important. No, we as a people we evolve. and it's a great thing that we're able to learn about ideas and histories and lessons of the past. If anything, when I said that, and maybe we moved on, when I said that Juneteenth was not an American holiday, is that for the very fact that none of us knew about it, how obscure it was to the public. This was not something that was American. It was not something that we valued. If we valued it, we would have known about it. They would have taught us about it in schools. They would have taught us. It was something that was not valued in America. Yes, Black Americans celebrated it, but it wasn't something that we didn't know about it.
I don't. But what makes it Pan-African? Because
Wait,
I'm not saying it's Pan-African.
like
I'm
you're
saying Pan-African is a very Pan-Africanism is a very it's a subset of the Black experience of the diaspora.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah, so
within the whole collective.
I'm a little confused. Maybe you can help me out here, because it seems like it's only American if people know about it, right? So there's plenty of things that are lost in history, and various reasons, right? Like if we look at our Native American brothers and sisters, all that happened to them, those things are lost in history. But is that not American history just because we may not know about it? Does it only become history until it's popular? Do we only own it? All right, a great act or a terrible act when a majority of the population is aware of it?
Well, I'm saying no. It's when we say something, when we're ascribing a culture to it. We didn't, for a longest time, this part of culture was not valued. I'm not saying it's not something that didn't happen in America. I'm saying America did not value this enough for the longest time until recent, like this year, 2021.
So where were we at again?
We were clarifying on Azzy's statement, and Azzy's point was that, and you can correct me again if I blow this, that America didn't take Juneteenth seriously until very recently.
And as of the date of its issuance.
Hello?
What was that?
Hello? I don't know what that was.
Somebody else's background.
Yeah, okay.
It wasn't mine.
All right, back into it. So, yeah, thanks for being here. All right, so we were talking about LARPing LARPing as an African.
Yeah.
So some people, feel that even though you have Black skin and African descent, that dressing in like quote unquote traditional African garb, which is also a weird thing to say, because what does that even mean? Like, what is traditional African garb? I couldn't tell you exactly, but like an idea of what an African would wear, that's like do you actually understand that culture? Again, which culture? Are you just dressing at it to get some sort of like cultural cachet, right? Like, do people in that area dress like that? Like, if you trace back the roots of those of that clothes, like, do the people actually dress like that now? I don't know. So I think that's an interesting question. Like, go ahead.
So I'm gonna
KTN.
As I guess like the default resident African, yeah, I mean, I haven't been there in a couple of years, so actually like almost a decade, 2 decades. So I'm pretty old. So now the problem is, Africa is distinctly, especially in West Africa, either Muslim or Christian. That's a big problem. After colonization, granted that there are some traditional, but they basically went into capitalism, or I would call it big man politics. There's an entire study about this in sociology, big man politics, where it's kind of a patronage system, or it's kind of like an elder system where the older statesmen or politicians, they just kind of have their little kleptocracy going on. They become the politicians. So yeah, they've taken on to capitalism. The traditionalism, it's there in certain pockets, more in rural areas, where you do have chiefs, you do have people who dress in traditional garb, but for the most part, it's almost it's like it's a less extreme. It's not a less extreme. It's like it's a lot of capitalism. I mean, everybody dresses in, most people just dress in like regular pants, shirt. Like there's the traditional garb comes from maybe weddings. It comes from maybe church. It comes from maybe some kind of ceremony, maybe government officials for their versions of parliament. But for the most part, no one's walking. Not very many people. I'm not saying no one is walking around in traditional garb on a regular basis. They want to be Western. There's a condition of Africans who want to be Western, and I can't deny that. Just because it's one of the last places to develop, and it's coming along, but more the traditions are more in like the social more than anything. Very spiritual. I always laugh at my family members who believe in or are hardcore on Christianity, but also believe hardcore in voodoo. I'm always like, oh, great, like pick one. You know what I mean? You better pick one because you can't serve two masters when it comes to your gods. And obviously, what's it called? Family structures. Very traditional with family structures. It's actually in some cultures more matriarchal, where the woman has more of like more of a guiding effect on the family than anything. And that comes from like a very strange saying that someone in my family once told me. You can always trust whose children they are because it comes out of a woman. So, and they have big clans. This is something I'm repeating from family. And they also are, depending on where you are, is a lot of like clan familiarity, and I think that happens here in the U.S. too, where we have these big families, big kind of like clan structures, where it's just these guys are a very big family, cousins, uncles, aunts. They stick together, they share lots of dwelling space, things like that. So for the traditional garb, I mean, I couldn't really say that anyone would take that much umbrage in Africa about African Americans or people in the diaspora wearing the attire. I don't think that they think that there's that much wrong with it. There might be a few sticklers. There might be a few people that are adamantly, offended by it, but for the most part, I wouldn't say they were.
Okay, what do you?
And I don't
Go ahead, Darcy.
I don't think there's a particular need to be wearing the traditional the traditional designs, the traditional garb all the time everywhere you go. It's more of, like you said, whenever there's a cultural event or something that, a family event or cultural event where we can now be ourselves amongst ourselves to to almost the fullest extent, the most extreme extent, where they can show pride and be fun, and in that yeah, that's the best time to do so. Yes, we've traditioned in a more more Western world. Africa has been, they had to succumb to that, whether they liked it or not. It is what it is. That's present time. Um, to tie that back into uh Juneteenth, whenever we do wear the garb, it's just it has a significance of paying homage to what was. It's not and what is still being upheld. It's not a outright this is better than that, or my culture of the past is better than what I'm doing now. It's not that attitude. Um I myself, I love going back and learning about my cultures. I've had the DNA test too. Like, I found out I have some I got Native American, I got Indian, I got the between the Nigerian and the between Nigeria and the Congo. That's what we call the sub-Saharan. They say that in all the because they can't really pinpoint a specific mark. They can't pinpoint a specific country or a specific tribe, so they just give you the generic. They give that to everybody, whether it's accurate or not. honestly. But it's fun. It's fun. It's almost healing. It's like a healing process, kind of like, oh wow, that's what they used to do. Even today, just learning about what they do today, that's enough for me. I've had people who come in and say, "You look like my cousin," in Sudan, or or you got that Ethiopian forehead, So I was like, hey, I I look like somebody back in the in Africa. So I'm like, hey, I can pinpoint, you know, certain places that I may have come from. Then there's that starting point. I can go back to that and look at to what they were doing, and that's fulfilling for me. You know, so the same thing for Juneteenth. Just knowing that there's a celebration amongst individuals. We're like, hey, and then there's specifics that happen within within the churches. They say certain things, like they ring certain bells at certain time, represent what happened, especially is how like South likes to, the Confederacy likes to, they wave their flags and they like to reenact their the battles over and over again. Same thing with people who celebrated Juneteenth before it was a national holiday. There are some places where they said certain things the same way, they reenacted certain events the same way. That's very important for it's very important, and it's something that people should know about, especially people who are connected to it. Because you never know, this might have affected your family, and I like to know that the my history has kind of dictated what is happening today, and that's why it's of uber importance to know what's going on.
Okay. Yeah. So, I don't know. I guess I feel. I don't know. And it's fine. First of all, if you're deriving value from it, right? That's absolutely great. If you can do that. But yeah, I'm guessing I'm more definitely still in line with GSU, and that like it's. Well, first of all, what about the rest of you? Do you derive value the people who have been born here, in the States? Is it like, if you could, let's say you actually could, list and find the places your families come from in Africa. Like, if you actually could, would it change anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
not my day-to-day existence, but I would love to learn about the places, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's just
I
general
mean,
knowledge, but
it's much
like,
answer for anyone.
yeah, it's general
Like,
knowledge. Like nothing from the culture or the history has been like passed down to me and my family. Like there's no connection to it that I have. Like, yeah, the general knowledge, oh, that's cool. But like what am I like from then, like after that, what am I using that for, right?
I mean, no,
Um,
that would literally be it. Like, I understand. Like, there's that is something that's important to some people, not to everyone. And I'm going to actually argue against myself here because, as someone who's half Persian, I've definitely tried to be more Persian than I'm allowed to be in like some social circumstances. And it's definitely like, I would try something and then I'd be like, all right, that didn't really work the way I wanted it to. I'm just going to go back to being like going back to the outside, right?
Mhm.
So like I can definitely relate to trying to like mimic a culture and then having it not work out. And I understand that that's not okay in a lot of circumstances, but I still think there is something to be gained from exploring that culture. Two reasons at least. One, because it's interesting at the very least knowing where your folks are from, and two, so you're actually informed on the history. Because one thing that I've encountered while looking into African history and African American history was some of the interesting movements that happened in the 60s as African Americans were trying to identify what history should be in the first place, right? I don't know if anybody's heard of Van Sertima. He is a professor of African American studies in the 60s and 70s, and he had written several books on Africans colonizing the New World before Europeans. And this was this whole movement, this whole thing that doesn't have any grounding for several reasons. Like, just like, there weren't any African foods or plants found in the New World and vice versa. So there couldn't have been like, the same thing that happened when, like, say Columbus did his thing, or the Vikings did their thing. So it's like, categorically false, but a lot of people believed in this. And to this day, I may or may not have relatives who still believe in this, right? Who still
What do you
think
mean what do you mean by categorically false?
like Africans didn't discover the New World before the Europeans did. And there's like a lot of reasons I can provide why that is the case. Wait, are you on the?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
This is the first I'm hearing about it, but I'm not the one to just take away value from certain information, certain doctrines. Like if I'm going to try to give credence to anything that I hear before, because like most most knowledge has been, it's been heavily controlled and heavily monopolized. So
I agree. And when I first heard it, I did give it the open mind. I've just done hundreds of hours of research on this topic because I've been forced to. And as a result of my research, I'm a lot more obstinate in my opinion. But
I know somebody that's ready to argue. I don't have an opinion on it. I don't really delve into that much history, but I have a good friend who's like, he'd be like diametrically opposed. It'd be interesting to hear y'all talk. I might have to try to set that up, but
Yeah, I saw that. Like, I saw that. Like, watched the whole video on it, and it only breaks down to like, there were black people here before Columbus got here, so they had to be, from overseas or something like that. But no, like, melanin is not exclusive to Africa.
Like, just that. I'll give you the whole thing. Right? Since I brought it up,
I mean, a lot of it amounts to like the same, like some of those like videos you watch on like aliens on like a sci-fi channel.
Let's go to hold on before that, Katarana.
Yeah, I just want to go ahead and answer the question when it comes to whether or not that adds value to me about knowing where I'm from. I actually went ahead and did a 23andMe test because it actually is kind of important to me to know more about my heritage. And unfortunately, basically, 23andMe said all of Africa. I was like, wow, that's really, really helpful. But I guess if I happen to be from like a region which I didn't know very much about, I would actually quite important to me, and I would have actually gone into looking more about the culture because that's what I had done for like the last 3 years when it came to knowing about like my 1/16 of like Indian part. So it's been like actually quite meaningful to know more about the region where my family primarily was from.
But
if the answer wasn't just all of Africa.
Yeah, I mean that's what it's going to be for a lot of people. It's just like I was saying previously. I'm not sure if you're here for that, but that for many of us, it's going to be all of Africa. You came from a lot of different places there, and so like finding out that you came from this one region, like I don't know what one region that could even be, right? Like this one region I didn't know about.
I mean, I guess outside of like that would be nice. I mean, like it would actually do something for me because like when I was learning more about like my Indian heritage, I wasn't just like that's really cool, and then like I watched like one Bollywood movie and then went on about my day. Like it actually became pretty integral to like some of my activities. I started going to like a lot more of like Hindu based festivals, etc. So at least for me, I would actually like start looking more into like some of the more traditional garments, etc. Actually trying to learn how to cook some of the food. So like it would actually influence more portions of my life beyond this is a cool and interesting fun fact.
Okay, so okay, so then I guess Yoshi Gamba, you're back. You were I guess this originally started off. Sorry, but this is kind of disjointed because of all the issues we've been having. But
no problem.
Yeah, you were talking about Juneteenth and whether it should be more of a American Day rather than an African Day, right? Because it's seen the lens through Africa, but like it's a uniquely American story, right? So does everyone else agree with that this should be looked at through an American lens?
Yeah, but that's we were talking about yeah, it should be, but it wasn't. And I don't know how. I hopefully, since it became national, it will be more. It will be in a greater, in a greater sense,
Well,
in
just
a more. Go ahead.
well, I mean, I think the distinction here is that just because Americans weren't acknowledging Juneteenth as a whole population doesn't mean that the holiday itself was not American in nature, I guess, is the way I would look
And
at
it
it.
also doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
African.
Yeah, the holiday
No,
should just
no one was arguing it being African.
But no, I mean, I think it could become. I mean, I think it being a mainstream American holiday and being celebrated as such is way better for the community as a whole, just because there will be an actual day that people pay attention to and think about these issues at least a little bit, right?
Exactly.
Like MLK Day isn't like an. I mean, it's a sort of an enormous success. At least it was like in terms of like what I did in grade school. But then like I'm not sure if that's still the same thing. I mean, like I was in grade school a long time ago, so I don't know if like what people do in school anymore when it comes to that. But like I think this being a summer holiday, not being in school, if folks are acknowledging what happened on a national day, at least reflecting on it a little bit, I think it would get more progress towards it's to create I'm getting mixed up here. I'm kind of going way too fast in my head here. I think I'm going to summarize it by saying that I think it'll make folks more sympathetic to Black causes, maybe a little bit. Like I'm not saying it's going to automatically resolve everything, but I think more sympathy and more understanding of the history associated would enlighten everyone and kind of help progress be made.
KTN?
I mean, from the outside looking in, I can't really speak to how everyone else, but I think America just has an obligation to make it a mainstream holiday. I mean, they already have, but I mean, America culturally has an obligation to make it a mainstream holiday, not just like, remember MLK Day was a thing until Arizona fought to not like celebrate it. They were like, nah, we're not going to do it. You know what I mean? And that kind of tells you like, yeah, the government was, the people through the majority of the lower 48 were like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then one state decides that culturally, like, it's not our obligation. You know what I mean? I think that the United States in general has to take it on as an obligation to not only just put it obviously in law and culture, but to like put it in the culture of America because it is American history. You cannot you cannot say that this history isn't American. And it's kind of weird because it like kind of rolls into the whole CRT argument where like CRT, right? Yeah, it's like, where like Juneteenth is like, Juneteenth is also kind of like part of that CRT argument because it's like, oh, now we have to learn about the other side of the history. Oh shit, like why's my kid got to learn about the fact that we held an entire state of African Americans in slavery for 2 years after we decided, just showing like the dirty, underhanded kind of situation, which goes back to the argument of like, even if the Civil Rights Act was enacted, it still took 40 years for the culture to get down with the program and start treating African Americans like on a fair and equal footing. So in general, yeah, I mean, I'm not ADOS, so like I can't speak for everyone. But I would say that the culture should be kind of, and I don't like forcing people to do things, but the culture should be forced to understand that like this is an American holiday, period. It's not a Black holiday. It's not an African holiday. It's a holiday of an American thing that America did wrong.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
that's
TSU, please.
yeah, and that's why I feel like it's important to drape this in red, white, and blue. Like this is a way. This is like a what's the word I want to use? This is just a way to move culture forward and show that hey, these are injustices that were committed, and this is why this holiday exists, and there's things that need to be done to right some of the atrocities that have been done, and just like you said, it kind of is involved with CRT and just bringing up the level of like American consciousness on some of the historical things that happen. And it's also why, like, I've talked to some Black people that like want to treat it as like an exclusive holiday, but me, I see it as aggressive with Black, white, and everybody else is celebrating this as well. Like, I think, like you said, it should be Like I do see it as a black holiday, but I do think it should be more of like an American holiday. And just
Yeah,
it's,
I mean,
it's like
at some point, there's that many, there's not that many Black Irish. I mean, whatever. But St. Patrick's Day, even though it's not a federal holiday, culturally, it's like everybody go get
exactly.
drunk on St. Patrick's Day. Today you're Irish. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like kind of ludicrous for you to like culturally say it goes one way, and then for you to not accept the fact that culturally it can go a different.
Yeah, if I walk into a park on Juneteenth and there's like a white family grilling, like I don't think like I'd be like, yo, that's dope. I don't know. That's just me though. But yeah.
Okay. So, what? Cut on. Do you raise your hand? I'm not sure. I'll speak.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. No, I was just gonna say that the only problem, I guess, of going ahead and making it a federal holiday, which it already is if we want to go ahead and integrate it more into the culture, there's gonna be like several generations of education that didn't even know about this because I didn't know about Juneteenth until like 3 years ago. Um, so I guess a lot of some of the whole point would be lost if at the same time we're not going through and adding this into like the federal education because otherwise people are not
Sorry, your
getting
audio is really breaking up. It's doing the
oh
thing it
is it
usually does again. Yeah, I don't know. But keep trying.
okay. I mean, can you hear me right now?
A little bit better.
Okay. I was just gonna say that, like, if we're not going ahead and further educating like the next generations and putting it into the curriculum, the whole idea of Juneteenth is partially lost because people are gonna even understand what happened on this day. It's just gonna look like a random on the calendar. It's now federally recognized because a bunch of people have been educated and maybe continue to be educated without even knowing what happened on Juneteenth. It's just gonna look like a random day.
Okay.
Yeah, and the same thing happens to a lot of holidays, not even just this one. Is like and I would like to use Martin Luther King Day. A lot of people just know about Martin Luther King, but they don't know the entirety of what he valued. A lot of people like to co-opt his messages and use it, whenever they want to talk about togetherness, but they never get into the real, more in-depth, critical thinking. All the just all values across the spectrum of Martin Luther King, who he was, what he stood for, and why he was such an important figure. Like that's what Juneteenth is, like Jubilee Day, Freedom Day. Like this means a lot for a lot of people, especially people who are still being touched by slavery now. Like if you have people who are still like alive, who are privy to people who are still enslaved, this day means a lot. And it shouldn't be just like it doesn't have to be and in fact I would push against just putting it in the red, white, and blue and just making it American because I don't want it to lose value. There's sometimes we have a way of just painting over things that have been taught, to try to incorporate it into the mainstream. Then all of a sudden, a lot of the value that was being upheld, all of a sudden it starts to be demoralized over a period of time. Like I don't want that. I feel like what it is should be incorporated into into America. Teach about what the red, the RBG colors mean, the red, the black, and the green colors mean. Because those are the people who've been upholding it this far. It's kind of just I feel like it would be kind of a disrespect to the people who are maintaining it. Just change it, just so to make other
When you
people want
say
to
I'm
people
not
that
sure
were
if I
engage.
agree with
maintaining it,
that.
you keep saying people that were maintaining it. Maybe you tried to expand on that while I was gone. What does that mean to you? Because I know people that
Literally,
aren't I know people that aren't Pan-African that were like big on Juneteenth. So I don't get what that means to
I
you when
don't
you
know.
say that.
So Pan African isn't just like the colors. It's the
Of course.
attitudes. You don't have to be Pan African to understand the value of what is being upheld. Like it's basically if you look at it from a broad perspective other than, it's basically a respect of the entire diaspora, the diasporas of all African black, all blackness everywhere,
Wait, but where do you see the connection when you say the people that upheld, and when you're making these claims and you're attributing it to a set of people? Who are the people? It's like explicitly.
it's not just one monolith of, it's not just one, it's a
No,
broad
but you're
spectrum.
using
Like
it
you
as
said,
one.
no,
But
I'm
I'm
not.
asking you, who are you
The
said like
RBG,
5 or 6 times.
RBG, yeah, RBG. You can think of RBG as strictly Pan-Africanism, or you can just think of it as black, the black experience. Like I said, there's multiple ways to think about it. I'm not attributing RBG strictly to Pan-African.
Wait, what is RBG?
Pan-African.
Is RBG a group of people? I keep
Red, black,
asking you,
green. Red, black, green. Red,
is
black,
that a
green.
group of people?
It's
Is that a
basically
movement?
it's not a group of people. It's a value. It's literally just a representation of the black
Wait.
experience across all the diaspora, entire diaspora.
Do you know what the question I asked you was? I specifically said about 5 or 6 times, you said it's been upheld by these people, those people, the people. When I kept asking you, what does the people or those people, or what is this group? And you said RGB. So I was like, okay, maybe you're making this a group now. So what the hell exactly is these people or
Can I
those
As in
people?
the entirety, as
I
in
try
the
to
within the black experience, within the black diaspora, there's a group of people who've been upholding and celebrating Juneteenth, despite us not knowing about it. So before we even knew about it, there was people who knew about it and knew about it since the beginning.
I think
What?
uh,
I'm more confused now.
Oh yeah, he finally got to what I was saying. Just like the people who tried to, who probably went behind the scenes and did the legislation to get us this far, or who were pushing the issue of keeping this holiday alive, or bringing the education to whomever they felt was interested in it, or whoever they felt was was willing to celebrate it or push it forward. But what I was going to say is, I'm going to go back to what Kacharana was saying about education. Now, one of the big problems is, even with Juneteenth, we kind of have like another thing that's kind of like looming in the background, where the pushback to CRT, and I will put Juneteenth in the CRT bucket, even though it shouldn't be. It's the idea that we now have states that are going out of their way to accept themselves on the educational level. So even with the federal institution of Juneteenth, and the cultural recognition of it. In some states, you're going to have some states that are just going to be like, no, fuck it, we don't care. Yeah, you've got Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Use the example of Arizona before, where they tried their hardest to keep MLK out of one of their national holidays. I could imagine, if anyone has seen the recent video in Texas, where the Texas legislature was the state legislature was trying to cut out multiple black leaders from their education about, I guess, white supremacy, or about the black experience. And their answer was, we're trying to let the educators choose their own sources in order to explain these things. If you ever get a chance, go ahead and look for that clip where they tried to cut out what's his name, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King.
Oh my god. I think
Yeah,
I've seen that too.
yeah, it was bananas. It went viral. But like that's like a small example of like how many states. And I think if you look at the numbers, I think there's like 20 states or something that are literally trying to push CRT out of their educational system.
Oh yeah.
Now, I'm not worried about them pushing CRT out of the educational system. What I'm worried about is all the other stuff is going to get caught up in the mix, where they're like, everything that's black is CRT. Now, that's kind of a thing that I'm more worried about. Just like Texas did the extreme and said, well, we're going to cut Frederick Douglass out. We're going to cut Martin Luther King out. We're not going to mention their names in our nation of, civil rights and things like that, because there are people who think that even talking about people like that is somehow not is divisive to the American to the American project, to the American culture somehow. Even though these things are already out of the bag, even though the information's already there, even though you can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle, whoever it is, taking awesome amounts of umbrage over this.
Well,
So
you
I think
definitely put toothpaste back in the bottle. Like, I think this is
Well,
actually like exactly how you can undermine this type of history. Like, if you cut this
well,
out of textbooks, there's gonna be people who literally have no idea who Martin Luther King
yeah,
or
well, there are going to be people, but there are also because like I said, there's like I don't know the exact number of states, but I know it's almost getting to more than half of the states because you got to remember between the left and the right, Democrat, Republican, it's all kind of lopsided. You do have states that have only 1 million people in them that are considered a state, competing with like other states that are mega states that have 40 million people in them. And the way our government works, in the Senate, blah blah blah, it just kind of looks lopsided. So yeah, you might have an aggregate of more actual people knowing about CRT because they live in Democratic states, because they live in more liberal states by the numbers. But if you look at the states that are trying to get rid of CRT or get rid of any kind of education of like Black history, um, it's more by the numbers of states. But the way it looks to me is you might have a dangerous situation where you're going to have two sets of education for two halves of the country, and what's going to happen when you get into the college level. I was just having a conversation with my friend today who was a teacher in the New York City school educational system, and he was talking about, yeah, you're going to have private colleges that are conservative, that are religious,
Sure.
who are
Sure.
known